Everybody, welcome back to our NRF Media Week. theCUBE and NYSE Wired communities coming together here in New York. Duncan Angove is here, CUBE alum, CEO of Blue Yonder. Great to see you, my friend. Thanks for coming in.
Thans, Dave. Great to see you again.
So it's nice to be here in this
sure is. Yeah.
iconic location. NRF Week, it's kind of crazy up in Midtown. But so I'm glad to be down here, kind of away from all the action. But let's start with you and I. We did a breaking analysis last year, mid last year. It was awesome. You had some interesting thoughts and takes on the opportunities that we have to really take out some of the waste in the supply chain. And one of the points that you made was that infinite resources, i.e. cloud, helps a lot because you can do a lot with that. But it feels like we have even further to go. So where are we in that sort of journey of taking out waste? And if you could quantify that, especially in a retail context, it would be awesome.
It's a great question. One of the things I've always talked about is technology turns scarcity into abundance. And a lot of that technology has powered supply chains, which has made cheap clothing available, cheap electronics, medicines, all of those types of things. The downside of it, though, is that it's created a lot of waste. And if you look at consumer expectations, there's sort of a rising need for what they consider ethical consumption, which means reducing waste and actually caring about sustainability and carbon emissions. And supply chains produce 60% of those. If you look at some of the stats around waste, let's just take food and like fashion as an example, the numbers are staggering. So every day we waste, there's about a billion meals that we waste. Every day.
A billion?
A billion. And 760 million people go hungry. 780 million people go hungry, right? So there's a lot of waste, right?
Wow.
Second thing from a fashion perspective, and it's hard to believe, but every few seconds, an entire truckload of fashion is going into a landfill, right?
Wait. You said seconds?
Every few seconds, yes, exactly. Around the world, something is going into a landfill. So there's a lot of waste. So it's sort of the dark side of what technology and supply chains enable, and it's raised the standard of living, but it's something that consumers and businesses are looking to address now. And technology is a huge part of that. Whether it's returns management, it's using AI to better forecast where demand is and what inventory you put there, whether it's using AI to drive markdown pricing to remove perishable goods so you reduce waste. There are all these roles that technology can play in basically reducing the impact of abundance.
I mean, it's a huge issue, especially in the United States. We're what, 5% of the world's population, 25% of its consumption. Do you see awareness, any sort of deltas around the world? I know, Far East, or certainly Europe seems to be more tuned in. US, we're this consumption society. Are we coming together and are you seeing a better awareness of this problem, or is it still?
I think so, and it ebbs and flows, right? Particularly in a world that's being driven by a populist agenda, right? I would think Europe is probably more conscious of it, but I think certainly people are looking for choices to make more sustainable decisions or things that actually reduce waste. We'll talk about returns management later, but that's something where we've definitely seen consumer demand for looking for more sustainable return options.
The other thing we talked about in our session last summer was really real-time visibility. The whole theme was around intelligent data apps and real-time ability to respond. Give us some color there. What's the state of real-timeness in supply chain applications today?
Not great, quite frankly, right? It's still plagued by legacy architectures because it's a super difficult problem to solve because the volumes of data are massive, the need for real-time speed is there. So you've got point solutions, batch-based architectures, arcane languages like EDI, all of those things make real-time very, very difficult. But when you step back and you think about what's the fundamental attribute that drives everything else we're looking for in a supply chain, whether it's efficient profitability, efficient fulfillment, it's the ability to respond to disruption, risk, and opportunity, or being more agile, speed is the thing. It's speed. And you look at the metrics we use to describe supply chains, it always has a speed or time dimension to it, like on time in full, just in time, quick response, how fast are my inventory turns. It's all about speed. So if you're able to inject speed into a technical architecture that supports supply chain apps, or you're able to inject speed into how a retailer operates, it gives them all of that, right? And that's a key part of that is visibility, right? The sooner you can see something, or the better you can use AI to anticipate something, the quicker you can resolve it, right? So visibility is absolutely critical, and that was really at the core of our acquisition of One Network last year, right? Bring a multi-enterprise, multi-tier network of trading partners that's doing $1 trillion in transactions, connect that to our apps and processes, and inject speed into how retailers operate.
So what's the relationship between speed and visibility? I mean, we could talk about that acquisition and what kind of visibility that gives you. I'm interested in what role AI can really play versus the AI washing that we see in the news every day. But explain that acquisition in a little bit more detail, visibility and how it relates to speed and supply chain disruptions.
Yeah, so if you think about today, on average, it takes 4.5 days for a retailer to learn of a supply disruption. 4.5 days before they know about it.
Wow, really? Okay.
Yeah, and then on average, it takes 40 to 45 days to resolve it. And it takes that long to resolve it because you're not behaving as one organization, because you've got functional silos. Logistics aren't talking to warehousing, aren't talking to stores, aren't talking to merchandising, let alone stakeholders across a value chain with your carriers and suppliers acting as one. It's very hard to respond to risk or opportunity if you're not doing it in a coordinated way, right? So that's where visibility comes in. Visibility within inside your enterprise, but then visibility across your stakeholders, the 4.5 days. I think I talked to you about this book I read. It was The History of Counterintelligence, written by a guy that came from GCHQ, the original Bletchley Park during World War II, Enigma code breaking, all of that. And they talked about the Victorian internet in 1860, and it was copper cables, telegraph, Morse code. And what happened was all of these cables basically followed shipping routes, whether it was from America or India, and they went back to London. And the traders there, because they had this Victorian internet, knew about things well before anyone else did that was waiting for ships or carrier pigeons. And it gave them an edge, an advantage. It changed trading and commerce, and it changed warfare, right? That's the speed of visibility and information flow. Not to mention, they could actually send signals back down it. So it's very, very similar today, the premise of bringing visibility to inject speed in knowing what's happening, speed into knowing what's going on, speed by using AI to diagnose outcomes, and then to actually decide and execute, right? That's really what it brings. It's the cognitive capability to inject speed powered by a network.
The Victorian internet, what a concept. But basically this rudimentary network system gave a significant advantage to the Allies. And what you described was essentially all these data silos. That's why it takes 45 days to even reconcile these issues. So your approach to that has been partner with guys like Snowflake, put everything into a single data construct, but still you've got to figure out how to harmonize all that data. There's different formats and there's different meanings of that. I know knowledge graphs play in here. Let's talk a little bit about the tech behind solving that problem.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. If you look at traditional legacy supply chain software, it's siloed. Different databases, different front-end architectures, really diverse, complex application topology. And that means you have a lot of latency as you're moving data between silos, right? Not to mention those decisioning systems are not connected to the systems that execute, let alone your trading partners across a network. So with Snowflake, we were the first company to build applications natively on the data cloud. Every week we ingest about 1 terabyte of data that feeds our cognitive core, our AI engines. Every day we process 20 billion machine learning predictions on the data cloud, every day. And that doubled in 3 months, right? So the pace of this at scale is really quite astounding.
Okay, let's talk about AI and agents, and we see a lot of single agents, we see a lot of digital assistants, a lot of agent washing, there's AI washing. What should we expect with regard to what agents can actually do for us? It seems like a very complicated situation to get all these agents acting like humans. It's not like they can pick up the phone and start doing whiteboarding. So how are you thinking about agentic, as the new buzzword?
Yeah, and you're right, there was a lot of AI washing just at the NRF shows. You saw everyone's an agent and an avatar, right? I mean, we've been at the AI game for over a decade now, right? We have 913 patents. A lot of those are in the AI, machine learning, optimization space. Supply chain is where linear programming originally came from, which was the forerunner to ML, and now we have Gen AI. And apparently if it's not Gen AI, it's not sexy anymore. But predictive AI, deep learning, machine learning, all of that has a huge role to play in supply chains, and that's what our 20 billion predictions, are based on, is that technology. Gen AI, though, also has a role, right? If you think about sort of in most organizations, the human being is the reasoning layer in a company, right?
Yes.
And we're going to start seeing that replaced with both predictive ML and also generative AI as a thing that can actually orchestrate it. So, but it has to be connected to the systems that actually execute. You need a bridge from the digital world to the physical that actually makes something move.
So let's talk about those back-end systems, because it seems to me, I look at what Salesforce and Benioff are doing with agents. I say, okay, that's good within their world.
Yeah.
They have access to the business logic. They have their version of a data cloud, and so it's relatively rudimentary compared to the mathematical challenges that you're dealing with. But it seems to be, potentially working. Same thing with ServiceNow. I think it's pretty well known what they're trying to accomplish. Your world is a lot more unpredictable. So you mentioned reasoning. So are we at a point where, or when will we be at a point where those agents can actually interpret the reasoning traces of humans and then learn from that and then apply that in workflows going forward? Are we at all close to that? You're going to tell me we can do it today?
I think this is moving at an exponential pace, and there's a notion here of combinatorial innovation where we're building on other things, right? And they're all driving like a really impressive pace. This time last year, everyone was saying generative AI language models weren't good at math. Now they are, right? You know what I mean? So certainly it's moving at a very, very rapid pace. And there will be agents. I think there will be agents for every role within a supply chain. To your point, supply chain's a little bit trickier than when you look at like a CRM or an IT service management use case. Those are very call center QSR driven, knowledge-based lookups, those types of things. It's not predicting and orchestrating thousands of things, right? If you look at Black Friday, we had to orchestrate just one day, 218 billion customer orchestrations, right? That's a very expensive model computationally to be running that through something that's token driven, right? So, but it's going to have a huge role. And I talk to you all the time about how in technology, we've always seen the user interface, the UI get updated, but it's always been the I. It went from a DOS prompt to GUI to mobile. This time it's the U being upgraded. The U is getting a cognitive upgrade, right? And in some places it will be a co-pilot that helps them. In other places we'll actually be able to replace it with an agent. Are you GPU constrained? I mean, you just mentioned it's very expensive to run this, these computations. Is it cost effective for firms like yours to actually inject, whether it's GPUs or other systems, into the equation? I mean, I know you're cloud-based, so the cloud guys have access. So I guess they're not constrained, but are the economics attractive? Well, obviously there's an explosion in data centers. It's consuming a lot of energy. Energy is another big component of this. But like even in the energy space, which is shifting from a commodity to a technology has this magical attribute where it makes things faster, cheaper and better over time at a dramatic rate. Just look at solar. The same thing's going to happen in the large language model layer, right? But again, you have to think about the use case you're applying it to so that it's economically efficient for a retailer or for us as a software vendor. So your point is the technology is deflationary, so it will. 100%. You're confident that it'll sort of address itself over time. What about, I want to come back to this notion of these back-end systems, because you're touching a lot of different back-end systems, and you have to harmonize that data in a way that agents can actually understand it and act on it confidently. It's got to be governed. How do you deal with all that? Is that, I mean, it's a combination of your IP and your partner IP, but I wonder if you could sort of lay that out and paint a picture of it. So in December, we just shipped a release we called 24.4. We need to come up with a catchier name. But it's a 2-year culmination of over $500 million of investment in R&D. It's arguably the largest supply chain software release in the history of the industry, and a big part of that was a suite of applications that were built to be AI native, right, connected to a network. A big part of that was unifying all of these applications and their data into the data cloud, Snowflake's data cloud, and having one unified set. So when you're thinking about forecasting, replenishment, allocation, merchandise financial planning, assortment, pricing, you're not moving data in batch between these different things. You have one common data model and you have a knowledge graph on top of it, right, that brings semantic meaning to it, which makes it much faster to extend, to do feature engineering, modeling for ML, all of those things, right? Not to mention, that is a translator for a large language model to understand the semantics and the context of the data. So that's what we just released last month, and it is truly, I mean, revolutionary moment in terms of what we're able to do with supply chains on top of the modern data architecture.
That's awesome. Now, of course, retail, generally low margin business, so you guys are taking cost out of the business, so it's a great value proposition. It's that time of year where people are, you know, doing returns from the holiday season. How are retailers dealing with the whole return and margin impact? Has AI affected that at all? How are you helping?
So we have a full set of capabilities around the entire lifecycle of returns management, right? So when you think about e-commerce and returns, right? Well, supply chains were never originally designed to ship each in the last mile. We've sort of solved that, right? But then certainly weren't built to process $1 trillion of returns going the other direction. And if you look at fashion, 25, 30% return rates, and it drives, where we started the conversation, a ton of waste and all of that. So we built and developed an entire suite that manages the entire returns lifecycle, from returns initiation for a consumer or in a stop or a store, all the way to returns orchestration. Where do you actually put it, right? Processing returns in a warehouse, and then even we have a whole network for drop-off kiosks, right? That did 50 million returns last year, right? So an entire suite that allows you to do all of that efficiently.
So, little personal stuff. You've got a deep tech background. You've worked at a number of large companies, a number of public companies. You're owned by, you know, obviously a very well-funded, established firm. You probably don't need the money, but how important is it to you from a just public perception standpoint, customer perception, to be a public company?
In all honesty, Dave, we don't worry about that so much, right? You know, I mean, we have a phrase which is, you know, we want our company to be powered by customer happiness and enabled by trust. And trust means you have people that have aligned incentive with customers, aligned to drive customer outcomes. And if we do that, everything else will sort of take care of itself. There's no pressure on us to go public. We have huge strategic advantages in market by being owned by a long-term thinking sponsor in Panasonic.
Interesting. So we had Alex Buzzari, who's somebody who's going to come on, I think tomorrow remotely. He was on it. We're at Supercompute. And he runs a company, you probably haven't heard of him, called DDN. They're sort of not a well-known company. They participated in high-performance computing markets, privately held company, never taken any outside capital. But there's this startup called Vast Data coming in, and they're getting all the action, right? And they're talking IPO, and so he's now talking IPO. So there's this sort of, it's like a marketing angle. You've seen both sides of it, you know? I see Databricks now a $60 billion valuation. I saw Anthropic with a $60 billion valuation. I say, gee, why go public? But you're basically saying you have enough presence in the market. You don't need the money, so you don't need to go public, but so is an IPO not in your future?
Well, we're the largest company in the category that we play in, right? You know, we're growing double digit, and we've got 3,000 of the largest brands in the world. So we don't really have a marketing or a brand issue. Anyone that wants to do supply chain or omni-channel is gonna be looking at Blue Yonder.
Right.
Now, we'll never say never, but it's not what drives us. We're focused on customer outcomes, and everything else will take care of it.
So just let me ask you to step back and put in your analytical hat.
Yeah.
You got a new administration coming in. You've got, I saw Gary Gensler this morning doing his exit interview on CNBC. I saw Lena Khan, you know, so we hope maybe M&A will start, you know, picking up again. You know, maybe crypto will, I mean, it seems to be unstoppable. I had Peter McKay on. He's the CEO of a company called Sneak. Clearly, they want to do IPO, but they don't need the money. They got about $400 billion or $1 million on the balance sheet. But he said, I think that those companies in the first half that need the money are going to go out IPO. Those of us that don't, Veeam is another one that we talked to here recently, we're going to wait and see. What's your take on the macro, the market, the climate, the IPO climate? Any observations?
Listen, we're entering a kind of a new era here, right? Where you're seeing the global order change. People are challenging just in time. There's the rise of industrial policy, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, but it creates a lot of uncertainty. And, you know, uncertainty is not a bad thing for us, because that's what our software looks to resolve, back to visibility and speed and all of those things. But yeah, I would say, you know, the IPO market's going to reopen at some point. We're in a very fortunate position because most of the competitors we're up against are, they're being forced to basically do capital raises, which can be very distracting. And we've got a sponsor that believes in investing in product and building a long-term enduring company.
So you're open-minded to it, but it's not an urgent need.
That's right.
Hey, Duncan, congratulations on what you and the team have done. You obviously have a lot of experience. You've taken some historical assets and put them together into building a modern supply chain system. It's quite remarkable to watch, so congratulations.
Thank you, Dave.
All right, you're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, keep it right there. Dave Vellante for John Furrier, who's also in the house. This is NRF Media Week with theCUBE and the NYSE Wired community. We'll be right back right after this break.